Right, guys, so today we're going to talk about the PHP coding standards. If you go on to make.wordpress.org and follow this along to coding standards, you can see you have PHP coding standards. If you click on this, you'll be able to get the PHP coding standards. Okay, brilliant. So the first thing is the single and double quotes. If you are not evaluating anything, so the thumb rule is that if you're not evaluating anything, then use single quotes, else use double quotes. Okay, so for example, let's see. Okay, so let's say we are writing a PHP code right here, and we say var is equal to this is some value. So if you see over here that we are not really evaluating anything, which means we are not using another variable into it, and which is why we'll always use single quotes when we don't have any variables included in this. But in case if we do want to evaluate, so let's say I define a variable called name and we write it as sum. Then in this case, if I want to go ahead and change this, name is, now if I want to include this variable, then in that case I'll have to use double quote. So let's try that. Okay, so in this case we are evaluating the value of the name variable, which is why we will use the double quote. Otherwise, in case we are not evaluating anything, then we'll just use the single quote. Okay, cool. Now you should almost never have to use escape quotes in a string, which means you can use a combination of double quotes and single quotes, and so that you don't have to escape any string. The text that goes into the attribute should be run through escape attribute so that the single or double quotes do not end the attribute value and invalidate the HTML and cause a security issue. Okay, so if you're passing any values, then make sure you do an escape attribute over here. Okay, now the indentation. Your indentation should always reflect logical structure. Use real tabs and not spaces. So the rule of thumb is that the tabs should only be used at the beginning of the line for indentation. Okay, so whenever you begin a line, you use the tab, for example, inside an array or inside a function. And whenever you are, in between the line, okay, in between the alignment, midline, then use the spaces for the alignment. Okay, and for associative arrays, each item should start on a new line when an array contains more than one item. Okay, so let's say I have an associative array like this. So I write query is equal to new WP query array. So it's saying that each property value, okay, each array item should get one tab. So you can see it's just one tab, it's not two tabs. Okay, and then there should not be any spaces after the line ends, and also there should be comma after each of the property values. Even if you notice at the end also we have a comma here, mainly because if we want to go ahead and shuffle the position, we can just cut it and paste it, so it makes it easier. And even if you want to add a new item over here, I can add it. So make sure that you don't have any space after the comma, and the last comma, there should be a comma at the end of the item, okay, the value. All right, so for associative array, each item should start on a new line when an array contains more than one item. So in case if it only has one item like this, then you don't need to really include in different lines, but if it does have more than one, then you should include them in separate lines like this. Right, perfect. Now for switch structures, case should indent one tab from the switch statement and break one tab from the case statement. Okay, so it's saying that if there's a switch statement, there should be one tab from switch statement. So case should have one tab from switch, and break should have one tab from case. Okay, so that's the spacing you need to do. Not spacing, actually tabs. Brace style. So braces shall be used for all blocks in this style shown here. So braces are these basically. These braces are used every time we're using if-else statement, as you can see. Okay. If you have a really long block, consider whether it can be broken into 2 or more shorter blocks functions to reduce complexity and increase readability. So like if you have a really long code, then see if you can, break them into parts, like 1 part, 2 part, and 3 parts, so to make it more easier to read and to, run the test easily, more faster. You are free to use alternative syntax control for control structure. Okay. Uh, Example, if, end if, while, end while, especially in your template where PHP code is embedded within the HTML, for instance. Otherwise, you shouldn't use them. So what this is saying is that, you have this style of writing if and else. So if, and then the condition, then colon, and it ends with, end if. Okay, and then you have while, then colon, condition, then colon, and then end while. So this type of declaration of the conditional statements are called alternative syntax for control structures. If you want to use them, you can, but only in case if you are embedding PHP in an HTML file, or let's say PHP, you've got lots of HTML and you are writing a PHP file into it, which could be also be a PHP file. Then in that case you use it. Otherwise, don't. Always follow the parenthesis form of writing the conditional statement. Don't use the alternative syntax for control structure method. Okay, brilliant. Now regular expression. Now Perl compatible regular expression PCRE prec function should be used in preference to their POSIX counterparts. Never use /e switch, use prec replace callback instead. It's most convenient to use a single quoted string for regular expressions, since contrary to double quoted string, they have only 2 meta sequences, backslash and double backslash. I guess you can go through that. Let's move further. Opening and closing PHP tag. When embedding the multi-line PHP snippets within HTML blocks, the PHP Open and Close tag must be in line with themselves. So if you check, this PHP tag is in line with the ending of the PHP tag. So the start of the PHP tag and the end of the PHP tag needs to be in line. Okay, it shouldn't be like this, something like this. This is here and this is here. They should be in line. Okay, in the same line. All right, vertically. All right. So in multi-line, this is the correct way, right? If you can see. And for single line, this is the correct way. Okay, cool. No shorthand PHP tags. So these are called the shorthand PHP tag. Ideally, this is how you write it. You write the code inside of the starting and the ending PHP tag, but this is also this can be used called shorthand. But in WordPress, as per the coding standard, do not use the shorthand method of writing the start and end of PHP code, PHP tag. Remove trailing spaces. Sorry, trailing, not training. Moment. Yeah, remove trailing spaces and omit closing PHP tags. So at the end of the line of the code, so for example, this is the code. I think I already explained that to you earlier also. If this is the statement that's ending, don't leave a space like this. Okay. Also, it talks about that if you begin a PHP tag in a PHP file, don't close it. Don't use the end tag. Don't close it. Okay, leave it like that. Okay. Space usage. Always put spaces after comma and on both sides of logical comparison, string assignment operators, and opening and closing parentheses, if, else, if, for, each, for, and switch blocks. So basically what this talks about is similar to JavaScript as well, that you have a space on both sides of the ternary operator. Okay, and then also after the not sign, and in the array inside of the round brackets you have a space here, and then there shouldn't be any space before the comma, but there should be space after the comma. Okay, and similarly over here as well, in for each statement inside the conditional statement there should be space everywhere, as you can see on both sides. In the conditional statement again there is a space. Okay, right. Now for functions we follow the same rule, but not leave spaces between the function name and the first round bracket. So everywhere else in the function we're using the same rule, and we're being generous in giving the space, but uh, before the parenthesis and after the function name there shouldn't be any space over here at this position, and rest of the places you can see being generous of giving the space. All right, great. When typing casting, um, all right, when type casting, do it like so. So when you are defining the type of the variable like this, then don't leave the space like this. Okay, so you can follow this rule. For array items, use the space around the index only if it's a variable. So what this talks about is that, as we all know, that we need to leave spaces before and after, but only in case if the index of the array is either a string uh, within the quotes, or if it's a number. In that case, do not leave the space. So as you can see, we have not left the space on both sides, so this is correct, but this is incorrect. Here also, because it's a number, we've not left the space on both sides, but so this is correct. But in case if it's a variable that you're putting inside, then definitely you should leave the space. So thumb rule is that when you're defining the array, then if it's a string or a number as an index name, then there shouldn't be any space, and if it's a variable, then there should be a space. Okay, on both sides. In a switch block, there must be no space before the colon for the case statement, so there shouldn't be any space before the colon. Okay. Similarly, there should be no space before the colon on return type declaration. Okay, so there should be no space before the colon over here as well whenever we are returning something. Okay. Parentheses, round brackets should have spaces inside of them. Okay, so round brackets, there you can see there's a space here, there's a space here, there's a space here, there's a space here. So on both sides, we're being generous of leaving the spaces. So that's what we need to follow. Formatting SQL statements using prepare statements. So it's all it talks about that you should use the WPDB prepare method for escaping quoting and int casting for the SQL queries. Okay, database queries. Avoid touching the database directly. If there is a defined function that can get the data that you need, use it. And this process is actually called data abstraction, which means that using the predefined function instead of the direct queries. So use the data abstraction method, and that helps you keep the code forward compatible, and in case where the results are available in the cache memory, then you can get it directly from the cache memory rather than putting the load on the database. It'll be running a lot faster. And if you still need to touch the database, which means if you're not getting any predefined functions, then you might want to get in touch with some developers, WP Hacker mail in the WP Hacker mailing list, and they might create a function for you in the next WP release, WordPress release. Okay, now next is naming conventions. So unlike your JavaScript where we use camel casing, over here the simple rule is that we use all small letters to define a variable name or a function name, and we separate the words with underscore and not camel casing, unless we are defining a class. So for a class, the first letter should be capital, and again the words will be separated with underscore. Okay, brilliant. Constants should be all in uppercase with underscore separating the words. Okay, so if there's a constant, you can also put that in you should also put that in uppercase, all uppercase, and separate them by underscore. Files should be named descriptively using the lower case letters and hyphens to separate the word. So only in case of a, defining the name of the file, underscore should not be used. The word should be separated with the hyphens, and they all should be in lowercase letters. But if you're using a class, if you're creating a class file, okay, file for the class, then the class file name should be based on the class name. So it should have a prefix of class and then the hyphen, okay, and then there should be underscore between, sorry, the underscore should be replaced with the hyphen. So for example, if we had a class called wp underscore error, then the file name will be first prefix by class, then hyphen, and then wp, and then hyphen instead of underscore, and then error, and then .php. Okay, cool. Files containing template tags in WP includes should have dash template appended to the end of the name so that it is obvious. So if it's a file containing template, then appended with template name, which would be included in WP includes directory of WordPress. Now, self-explanatory flag values for function arguments. So use true and false, without wrapping them in quotes. Okay. When more words are needed to describe the function parameters, use an array as an argument. So if you have more than one parameter that you need to pass, enclose that in an array while passing to the function. So these are all best practices. Interpolation for naming dynamic hooks. So some hooks you might want to define dynamically. Dynamically means that you just define the variable, and later on, the values will be assigned to these variables. So if you have a class, sorry, if you have a hook which has a name like this, then you should wrap it within double quotes. Okay, cool. Ternary operator. When using ternary operator, check if the condition is true and if not, and not if it's false. So whenever you write a statement, the statement should ideally be if this is true, okay, and not if this is false. Okay, so that's one of the best practices. Yoda condition, I'm sure you already know about it. We covered that in JavaScript tutorial. So it talks about that when doing a logical comparison involving variables, always put the variable on the right hand side and put constants, literals, and function calls on the left hand side. If neither side is available, if neither side is a variable, then the order is not so important. Clever code. Now, some people might be very clever in writing, codes like this, like shortcuts in a shortcut way, small codes. But understand that readability is more important than cleverness or brevity. Instead of writing the code in this way, in this fashion, which is a little difficult to understand, it's better you write it in this, in this way, which is more easier to understand. It's okay if if it consumes a couple more lines. It's all right. It should be more understandable. Error control operator. Okay, so PHP supports one error control operator called @ So there's an @ sign, and if you prepend @ sign to any expression in PHP, any error message that might be generated by the expression will be ignored. So if you use @ sign before an expression, any error that's supposed to be generated by the expression will be ignored, and this is highly discouraged. Some people do it, but no, you don't do it. Okay, because even PHP document had some warnings that if you use this this the code might just die after that. In case if there is an error, it will not give you an error, but the code might just die, and the rest of the code that you've written might not be executed by the system. So don't use the @ sign control operator. Okay, don't use extract function either. And some people used to use that. This is basically used I think while creating widgets in one of the widget functions, extract function to extract the contents of a variable. It's a terrible function and makes the code harder to debug and harder to understand. So there's some information available on the sites for this, but basically why we're discouraging it is because it's hard to backtrack. How did that variable come into its current state? How did that variable come into existence in the current state of value? So it's important that you don't use the extract function. Okay, then it's the PHP documentation. I'm going to be covering just not all, but a little bit of it in this tutorial. Maybe tomorrow or later I'll prepare the next tutorial for that, but just let me cover that. So for documentation of PHP, following is the list of what should be documented in WordPress files, so like functions, class, methods, classes, class members. Requires, includes, hooks, inline comments, file headers, and constant. These should be documented. And the grammar that you use in that, it should be you should keep it description short and focus on documenting what and when does the element does something. So the tense that you'll use will be does something or not do something. So for example, this variable does this, rather than writing this variable do something. Okay, so this is the form of the tense that you'll use while writing the comments for that particular function for yourself. All right, again, examples. What does the function do? Displays the last modified date of the post. So don't use display the date, use displays the date. Similarly, filters the post of the content. Fires after most of the core is loaded. Okay. And then there is AdSense. So you must have seen in some of the files in the documentation that I'll show it to you one moment. So there's this link. You can check it out, pause the video and check it out. So there's this link. If you click on it to get started, to get the version number, okay, you will go to this page. Then you click on source. Go into any file for which you want to check its version number. So let's say I want to go to WP admin user menu.php. So while writing the documentation of the function or the file, it says AdSense. So how do you get this version number? So basically you come here, you click on blame. When you click on blame, you'll see that you've got this revision numbers available. So just click on one of them. If you click on it, it says that it's a change set number and there is a ticket number. Click on the ticket number and you can see the milestone 3.1, which means we've got the version number 3.1, and it's the same over here as well. Okay, so that's how you get the version number, because some file will not have AdSense, and if you want to know the version number, when was that function written, when was that file written, you can get that from here. All right, brilliant. So I think that's about it, and if you have any questions, you can leave down the comment. And thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Bye bye.